This is Chandra Lynn, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
I love our conversations that we get to have offline. It's always fun to hang out with you. I don't get enough of you and hanging out and just talking shop and everything else. So thanks for coming on the show. Always good to check in with you. You've written a new book, so I want to talk about that called Root to Rise. I was reading through it. One of the things about I think I'll say this about our generation is that we are able to communicate in a clear way that it resonates with a lot of us. We've all been through these same experiences, and you're providing this portal so you can look and say, "Oh man, that's me." Like you're describing me in so many ways. And this is just right off the jump with your book, because we all go through things, but those of us that are good with words, we're able to communicate like, "Hey, it's all right to have felt this way. It's all right to have encountered this thing." Because we all encounter these things. So in your own unique way, you've already connected with me, and it's on page one, just so you know. So I love reading the book, and it really was impactful for me. And I can't wait to dig into some of the details.
Thank you. That is an amazing open. Actually, it's probably the best compliment that I can have, because what I look for is, for it to resonate with people and for them to think I'm communicating directly to them. And I think
Yeah.
that part of that is because it's based on nature-based wisdom and universal truths that everybody can relate to it. And when they
Mhm.
see themselves in it, or really recognize that that's for them, I think it just makes the reading experience so much more compelling, and the encouragement to land on such a deeper level, because ultimately I just want to be an encouraging voice to give
Yeah.
them, hope and, that real tools for loving life.
I love it. Yeah. And there's a lot of people in this space. So when you write something like this, it takes some guts to do that. But also, just because someone else has I've read, like, we'll say it's the same basic book and I've read through it, it doesn't work. It doesn't work, right? There's so many different ways to tell this thing, and it's like writing a good song. Look, you've worked in the music industry. You can write 100 songs that are all great, but one of them is going to connect with someone, and it's going to matter, impact their life in a special way. So again, I appreciate the guts to write something. I know, like, if I go into I go to like a book event at the Barnes and Noble down in LA, down by the farmers market. You want to get intimidated. Like, don't bother writing a book. You go to that Barnes and Noble and you look at like the 100,000 books in there, and you're just like, why bother? It's like something, but you did bother, and I think that's wonderful. And if I'm not mistaken, this is part of your root to rising, is saying, hey, like, this story, I know it's important. I'm going to spend the time to write this thing.
Yes. So a couple things. First of all, thank you for taking the time to read the book. I think that my reason for doing it is because life isn't always easy, and we know
Mm,
that. And I felt compelled to tell the world what I know from my own experience and from my coaching certification, as just one, effort towards helping people. I So for those who don't know, this is my third Break It Down show, right? So we've been together for a while.
yeah.
And in that time, I launched Glow Living, which was for a community of growth-minded people like ourselves,
Hmm.
to have a place to go and learn about coaching tools and techniques and things that they can help their own life. Um, and I started to, have some challenges, because it's just hard. It's an attention economy. It's very hard to get the attention on all the effort and work that was going into it. And as you know, I am also a marketing consultant in the music industry. And so my energy was just divided. And I felt that Glow Living, was starting to, I was just doing things to keep the lights on for a while. Just be honest with you. It was starting to get challenging to
Mm.
juggle it all and wonder what it was all for. And did anybody care? Was anybody listening and whatnot? And, I just, decided that, well, and we went through this little thing called the pandemic too,
Oh boy.
which was, made it even more tough to connect, because through Glow Living, I'd created Root to Rise as an online program, a workshop. I'm sorry, online course. And I also was doing in-person workshops. But when the pandemic hit, everybody was just getting zoomed out. We were online so much that I decided I want to do a book version. I want a written version where people can shut the computers down, get intimate with themselves in a book. And, then it became obvious a workbook was necessary, which I had started using in a workshop program. But I thought, oh, yeah, people need a workbook too. And this thing, was born, and it took years to make. I mean, I think I started it close to 5 years ago. So thank you for saying that, it takes bravery and things to do that, because I didn't know whether I was going to find my audience. I didn't know, anything. And I just had to put all that aside. And it's like you said, some voices are going to resonate with people. It may or may not be for everybody. I kind of had to deal with the fact that, it's not going to be for everybody, but that some people may really resonate with, what I'm saying in my voice and be helped by it. And that was enough to drive me to keep going.
I'm going to put the link for the book here in the comments so you all can get it. It's called Root to Rise. It's in pre-sales now. So Root.
Oh, Amazon is breathing down my neck for the final version so that all the pre-orders can be fulfilled. And I'm super excited to have the printed version because, as you know, I just said I originally did it for that. But yes, the pre-order for the digital version for the Kindle will be fulfilled at probably July 1st. Everybody will receive it by then. But, I also will have the printed version. And then following that will be the companion workbook.
Love it. So I was talking to my mom today. I was trying to figure out an old memory and try to get it sorted out. And I would say my mom's memory is probably not as good as mine, and it's also older. So sometimes she'll say something to me that will unlock part of my memory. And I have this really powerful memory. Anyhow, we were talking, and I had just put down your book, and I was thinking about core principles. And when we lock in on a core principle, sometimes it's a traumatic event early in life. And it gives us like all of it, like everything's a balancing act, right? I mean, you know how this works, but you get these core principles. She's like, do you remember the time we were in Sacramento and we went to this farm and then you just broke out? You'd never done this before, but you opened the latch and you went down the road and you knew where you were going because when a family found you, they brought you right back. But I look back and I'm like, gosh, that's like a core principle for me. I'm not someone who breaks out of things, but I am adventurous and I'm curious and I want to go see and do things. And so, look, this feeds my spy career. It feeds this podcast career. A lot of people they'll say, how do you get all these people for your show? And I'm like, I asked J.R. Robinson. I'm like, hey, can we come over to your house and do a show? And they go, yeah, why not? I'll make you some cookies. So these core principles that lock in they enable us, but they also create problems for us because we maybe rely too heavily on them or there's something in there. And I wanted to get your thoughts on core principles and then how they help and hinder us and how do we balance that?
I mean, certainly from a young age, we have these experiences that, affect us in a way that become part of, for lack of a better word, that we live our life and go about things, and they really are like a colorization of the lens that we look through when we're assessing things. And I think that the challenge is that we could come across people that have different views, and that's something that we deal with in all of our relationships. And it's really just because they're looking through a different lens that's based on their own set of beliefs. And so, with Root to Rise, there's a couple of things that happens. One is that there's a discovery process to identify some of those beliefs, because some of them serve you and some of them don't in positive ways. Some of them have really been there to help you, and that also need to be updated from an adult's point of view, because they might have served us well as children needing security or safety. They may, potentially limit our growth as adults when we are safe, and now we need permission to give ourselves permission to grow and explore new things and deal with other people's differences in positive ways that can keep us connected with each other. So identifying our beliefs and questioning them is actually a really good thing. So you might have had an experience where you broke out, and how funny is it that your show is called the word break in it. Interesting thing for you that can be explored. And maybe somewhere down the line, breaking out, breaking through, breaking it down, whatever that is for you has served you in a way that's helped propel your growth. You've realized that you have to put yourself out there, and ask these questions of people and things like that in order to grow and propel your career. And it served you well because of it.
Mm.
So
It has that desire and that willingness to go out and see someone, whether they're Iraq or Afghanistan, wherever it is. And so when our side says, this is what's happening, and I'm like, is it? Let's go find out. Or if it's like some kind of political conversation today and someone says, this is the way it is, I'm like, I'm going to go find an expert. I'm going to find another expert, and they might disagree. And now you get to sort out the fact that these two experts were like this, and they agree on a lot, but where it gets sticky, it's sticky for all of us, right? And so that is sort of like my charter to what I do is to lend clarity. And usually the clarity is these things are more complex than you're allowing. And so allow these folks to be doing their best, because what they're trying to do is very hard. And if we all slow down a little bit and be a little less worried about what somebody else is doing, we might worry more about our own selves and what we are in the role of that. And one of the things, like when I advise young people, is I'll say, do you care enough to do something about it? And you're like, no. Like, well, then you don't care enough, and that's okay. What do you care about? Put your energy there. Like, if you don't have the desire to go work on to make the environment better, you're not going to go take classes in that and get a math degree or something like that to work on it. Then what do you want to do? And put your passion more focused into that thing. And that's sort of how I approach that thing, and sort of where the Break It Down show comes from.
it's really interesting. And I think that never have we needed it more than now, especially with AI, to have that kind of level of critical thinking. And especially with being, living in a divided nation, to figure out where we are in all of this is very important. It's because it's confusing and it's not always easy to know where we stand, and then why we stand there. And is that coming from, like you said, some kind of guiding principle or something from a belief system from your family or from your upbringing? And is that still serving you today? And those are all really, really, really great questions. And 3 key life questions that I talk about in the book are, what do you want? Why do you want it? And then what are you willing to do about it?
Right.
Because sometimes we can't even get past the first one. What do we want? I don't know. There's so many things we want. And then we go, why? Why do we want those things? We just want it. I don't know. If you really do deeper exploration, you can find your why, and that can propel you through the hard times. Like my why in writing this book became so much about, like, why do I care about helping people? I had to really dig into that. And recently, actually, about a year ago, a little over a year ago, my best friend of 40 years died by suicide. And as a coach, it left me with this all these thoughts about what could I have done, really looking at mental health issues and how they evolve and what can be done for them. And that loss propelled me in a whole new way to have my why strengthened. Why am I doing this? Because I do care about people, and I do feel like I have hard-won wisdom inside that can be transformative. And if nothing else, I can be an encouraging voice. I know the tools work because I've workshopped them and had testimonials and all of that. But even if somebody could pick up my book and just hear my voice and go, okay, there is hope, there are tools there I could do, there's somewhere to go, then I feel like I've done my job. So that why starts to take on a lot more meaning. Another why is because I have a kid. He's 19 now, so he's a man. But if anything were to happen to me, I would have a guidebook for life for him, how to love life. I want, despite, what happens to me, I want him to thrive. And so I want to leave him with a guidebook. And I thought, wow, this is something universal. So let me do it for everyone. And then the third question of willingness. It's like, what am I willing to do about it? Am I really willing to do the work of writing this damn thing, tapping into the deepest roots that I have to be able to summon everything I've got to put into it? because I can tell you this process of writing and self-publishing is not for the faint of heart. The industry's changed a lot. There's very little support. There's all kinds of challenges with doing it. And so I
Yeah.
had to really stay true to my why and my willingness. There are times when I felt, would wake up during the one day and go, I just don't feel like I want to do this. I wasn't feeling willing. And then I tap into my why and get that willingness back on track. And so
Back on
those
track.
3 questions I would invite everybody to look at when they're looking at, doing the challenging things in life.
Yeah. Back on track, burned out, writer's block, these things that are small things that hem us up. Like if you really get back into that root of why you're doing this. My buddy Hilliard is a fantastic screenwriter, and he said, look, if you have writer's block, then write one word. Can you write 100 words? Of course you can write 100 words. And once you get writing 100 words, now you're writing. Change the script that you're working on. Put a different one in front of you. And this is his example because he's a screenwriter. And you just work on the next one. Can you do one word? Okay. Can you do 10? Okay, great. Can you do 100? Of course. You can. Of course, you can do that over and over again. You just write and you write and you write, and then pretty soon you've paved over the top of writer's block, because you're never short on ideas if you're in the writing business. You're never unable to write. Of course, you love writing. And so you just get back to that root of course I can write one word. Of course I love writing. Of course I can write 10 words. I can improve this sentence. I can go back to something I wrote earlier, and I can read it and I can tune it up. You can always write something. And it makes writer's block seem like a silly thing when he explains it like that.
I agree. And I think that writer's block, there may be deeper reasons for the block. I mean, Root to Rise is about getting unblocked. So I look at all the reasons for blockages, I should say. And one common one is imposter syndrome. A lot of people go, who am I to write this? Am I even, or despite, the credibility. So people can I just need that one more certification, or I need to go back to school, or I have to read that book, or I need to read these podcasts. I mean, there's so much information. There's so many amazing experts out there. Am I valuable enough to have something to offer, that kind of thing? And truly, I believe the answer is yes, because we need a diversity of voices and opinions and perspectives on things. And there's things that you have to get over with writing. Like, for example, I didn't see myself as a writer at all. I'm a marketing expert, so I do marketing writing. But as far as writing a big ass 400 plus page book, no, I didn't see myself as a writer. So I was worried about that. But like you said, you chunk it up. You just start, somewhere, and you do that, and then, you can move into it. For those people who are trying to, tackle a writing project, I originally put chapters in different Google Docs, but then I moved everything over to a program called Atticus, where it sewed all that together. And so there are tools out there now to help you chunk things up and write in manageable ways, and then being able to bring it all back together in a platform that can, publish it for you. And in that particular program, you can export EPUBs, PDFs, docs, so it really helps you with the formatting stuff. I think just keep in mind that there's tech solutions for a lot of the blocks that we put in front of ourselves. Like, we can't do that.
Yeah. The other thing you can use is AI to just get rid of the blank page problem. Give me a 250 word primer on this, give me an outline on that. And even if it's completely wrong, now you're editing. And editing is a higher level step. And then the writing the writing is assumed when you're editing. And then you're just improving that thing that's on the page in front of you. And then next thing you know, you're nowhere near the thing that the AI gave you, but you're writing your own creative stuff. There's a lot of ways to get around
Sparks
it.
and things. Yeah. For me, I used a AI called Pro Writing Aid. So it's not like ChatGPT where it gives you all the text. What it does is you can upload your manuscript, and it can do critiques and analysis. So what it did, so it doesn't write for you, but it also kind of has a Grammarly type of thing built in, so you can avoid typos and things. And, it'll help you rephrase it'll give you little prompts if something needs to be rephrased to be more active instead of passive, and things like that. But it was super cool to get the manuscript analysis because, well, there were two types of analysis. One is they'll show you conflicts like, oh, this is redundant to that section, or, this one didn't had enough case studies or whatever it was. But then the other type of analysis was from the reader's perspective. So the AI is kind of like a reader, and it gives you a reader critique. So that one's pretty neat. It'll kind of give you the assimilation of what kind of feedback you could get from a potential reader. So to have those tools available is spectacular.
A couple of years ago, my brother took his life, and I have my own battles with suicidal ideation. That's a result of my PTSD from combat, and I'm under control of it today. And who knows about tomorrow? But I'm in good shape, right? I'm not too terribly worried about it because I've done a lot of work to get past that. But when he started his storm of ultimately his demise, we had over a year kind of to deal with it, and we did all the things. We got the dogs, the drugs, the 5150s, all the things that kind of come in that whole horrible packet of thing. But I went back to my therapist, and I'm not back. I'm regularly with my therapist, and I'm like, hey, this is going on. She's like, let's protect you because your brother is sick, really sick, and he didn't get sick overnight. He's gotten sick over a long time. You don't get to this spot when you're in your 40s because of you're sad or something. Like, this is a serious problem. You need to treat it like he's got stage 4 cancer. Maybe he'll survive, maybe he won't. Either way, you're going to go through a trauma here. And so we worked almost exclusively on me. Because when my brother would drop things on my doorstep because he didn't know what else to do, and he can give it to me, so we're talking, and I'm like, how you doing? And he's like, terrible. I'm like, oh, what do I say? Like, I can't fix that. I'm I can love him. I can maybe cheer him up for 5 minutes, but when I hang up the phone, he's still going to be the same guy that can't sleep, the same guy that's in this fight, and I can't fight that for him, And I was able to get ahead of, what ultimately was inevitable. We didn't know at the time, but I knew he was in real danger. And the one thing I learned from that was to get well in front of that stuff. Like, when you wait for someone to reach out a hand when they're at the end of the rope, they don't have a free hand for that. You got to grab them way before and sit down with people. Like you and I, like, if we try, we're not great about it, but we always try to get together if we're in the same town and everything. And these things are important because you have other people looking out for one another. And you have a chance of possibly not going through that next gate that's irrevocable, and you're like, I'm now on the point of no return, and I'm going to go down that path, and who knows where any of us end up down the road. But it was one of the things that I picked up from my brother's passing is the one, slow down, see the beauty in things a little bit more, look for things that maybe I'm too busy to see, but also, and I already kind of do this, but make a lot more time for people that matter in your life. And really everybody matters in my life. So I should act like it. And I should really treasure fellowship and moments together and just calls and even attempts to get together, because those things, they might make a difference in your life, might make a difference in my life. And even if not, like I tell my, John, I always tell John, like, let's just go have so many nightcaps that we can't remember which great moment it was that we're trying to remember, because we've just piled so many great things together. And I'm not talking about being irresponsible. I'm just saying, get together and sit on a dock and have a cocktail or a Coke or a coffee or whatever, and just enjoy being in each other's presence and get great at that. And that's what I took from my brother's passing was to get more of these things right, spend more time on these things. When we talk about work-life balance, there's usually workaholics. So focus on the life side more, your work life will be able to withstand it, because the other stuff is so much more rich in joy and important things.
So there's so many things that you said that I love to hear. One is that you took care of yourself in this process and reached out and got a resource to support you, because the more you can support yourself, the more you can be there for others. When that whole thing about your cup's full, then you have more to offer out. And so this taking care of yourself and practicing self-care and getting your own therapist and stuff is an amazing way to value yourself and to like you said, protect, or at least prepare, as much as you can for that kind of thing. The other thing is that you transmuted the pain into a purpose. Like, I know that you well enough to know that also here to help people, and what drives you to do this is hope, so at some point, people are going to be inspired and supported in their lives through what you're doing. And then that you're able to see gifts left behind from a very painful process. Sometimes we don't see those right away. Sometimes they come with time, but to know that they will come, and they will be there. That process that you went through is so not easy, and it allows you to relate to other people who have gone through the same thing.
Yeah.
So it and help them. I think that it's something that we are, as humans, have to be able to recognize it happens to us all, and it doesn't need to stay in the shadows. That it's something that we can talk about. Well, it doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about suicide specifically. It could be, really any grief or loss that we're going through, because there's, people have recognized stages of grief and things like that. And in some cases, that's all universal to us. And so we're human in that we see each other, ourselves in each other. We see ourselves in each other. So good job, with protecting yourself and supporting yourself through that, and being able to see the gifts left behind a traumatic situation.
My brother was so tough too. And the one time during COVID, he could not worry about a job, not worry about paying his mortgage, because all these things were sort of put on pause. But he just couldn't manage to take care of himself, and so he wanted to be there for his family, but he was in no shape to be there for them. And so the more he fed into that paradigm, the more of a dead end he was in. And I don't know that I could have done anything to turn that around. Of course, I would try if I had another shot, but you don't get another shot. You just have to do it in the time that you do it. And I wish so desperately that instead of being tough, that he had another tool to go to. Because when he ran out of tough, and he was just so ashamed of himself that death was the only answer. This is the part of the crazy part. When my brother took his life, he was a mechanical guy. He worked in a refinery. He invented a one-time use gun in his garage and shot himself in the head with it. This is a talented guy, who still had amazing things. And so and I share this not to be morbid or morose or gross or anything, but when you get in that spot, if he was recoverable, he couldn't see that he could do this amazing thing in his garage. It's an incredible talent, but he lost the ability to see that in himself, and through a lot of different things that were out of control in his life. But it's just such a, well, I'm hoping that it redefines the rest of my life. Like that, I take his passing and turn it into gifts, and turn it into counsel, and turn it into patience and grace, all these things that I try to extend to people. And at my best, I'm pretty graceful and gracious. But when I fail, which is all the time, because I'm a human, I'm like, man, I got to get back to trying to extend grace, because even though I want to say something nasty to this person, I'm going to let them be where they're at. And I like to say, my thing I say now is, I let folks be folks, and wherever they're at, whenever they're at, if I'm on step 7 in this process and you're on step -3, I have to let you be at -3, because I can't get you up to 5 without doing the other steps. And if it's my job to even get you there. So I'm just going to allow you to be where you're at. And if you need something from me, I'm glad to give it,
Yeah, I think, we can easily walk through life kind of with a defensive posture, thinking that all of how somebody's acting is personal. And most of the time it's not. They either don't have the tools, or they're in a bad space, And part of the book, I talk about these energy arrows that we give off, and that we also can receive. And so when we're walking through life and somebody is, sending out negative energy arrows, it's not always meant to be directed at us, but we could take those in and internalize them and get wounded from that. And so we can create protective shields, psychic protections, whatever you want to call them, through fortifying ourselves and being able to walk into the world and allow people, like you're doing with being where they're at, and not have to be so defensive or to get wounded by what everybody's coming, out with. And then we can also take responsibility for the arrows that we're putting out in the world. I mean, we've all had bad days, and we might need to spout off or vent in a way that can affect someone negatively. especially those people who don't know how to protect themselves from it. And it can change the way that they see you as a person and things like that. I also wanted to say that one of the things I talk about with grief and loss is that one way to honor the person that passed, despite all their humanness and everything, and how maybe you've even been hurt by it, is to think about the qualities that you really did like in that person and determine which ones you may be able to assimilate in your own, way or persona. Like I lost someone, somebody who I worked with, who was just this most generous person. He was the guy that he would do the little extras to make everybody feel special and for it to be a good time. So he'd be the one to get the limo, to go to a concert, or he'd be the one that would tip the guy for the better table, or he'd be the one that, would bring home the souvenirs or whatever. And so that made me value generosity in his character. And I started to think, well, where could I show up as a more generous person? So I credit him for that. And I feel like the times that I'm generous and really pull that out of myself, is a way to remember him as well. So,
Yeah.
There's things that we can do to keep that person alive inside of us.
Heck yeah. Yeah. In the book, you talk about coming up and trying to figure out, like these core principles that you start when you see your folks struggle and you see your grandparents and how they live and love each other. And in our generation, my generation, I'm a Gen X guy. I'm not going to put anything else on you. You can decide what you want to do. But a lot of us were kind of left our own devices, and we wanted it that way. And so for me, it was safer to be out of the house than in the house. And so I did open that gate and take off and go explore the world, which this became a guiding thing. It became a guiding thing on an American camp in a conflict zone. Like, how do I get out of here? Well, let me go do some spy things. But that desire to do that made me have very little and openly expressed respect for authority. Boy, like not just challenge, but just disdain for it. And I still have a little scent of that on me today, even as I've mellowed and matured. But that because I knew I could do things myself, I wouldn't take help. I'd spit on help, because or authority, right? Don't do this. This is dumb. Yeah, well, let's see how dumb it is. And I would go do the dumbest things just to spite myself, and this is like a mature lesson. Like, hey, if I did less of that, I just got along to get along at times, and then decided to be exceptional in some other thing, or then I could be more exceptional. I could be less destructive, because boy, I'm a self-destructive motherfucker. In my youth, oh my gosh, there's no way I could work in corporate America even today, because I wear it on my face. Like, I have this thing, and I'll shut up here in a second, but if we're in a group setting and someone's lecturing, I have to put my head down and I have to just write notes. Now, I may not be writing any notes about what the person is saying, because my memory is such that I can remember most of what's said and grasp it. But if I sit there and I look at them, it looks like I'm daydreaming. I'm not paying attention, even though I'm recording everything at the best level anybody else can do. Like, there might be someone else who has memory like mine in there, but I remember the things. And I had to write things. So I would literally write down like every president, every vice president, every state capital, 5 cities from every state, 5 countries, because if I did that, it looked like I was being studious in trying to remember what was being it was a performance, but I had to learn to do that, because if I didn't do it, my resting disdain face would betray me, and I would get into so much trouble. And I'm like, but I heard everything they said. Like, yeah, well, it looked like you were not paying attention, but I just told you everything the person said. And then they would say, it doesn't matter. I looked like I wasn't paying attention. So all this stuff goes into this slurry of, we were so independent in my era. We were so disdainful of authority that it hurt me professionally, and it hurt me personally, because I let that stuff be too dominant in my life until I learned to back off of it. And so when you were writing about some of those things that you talked about, it resonated with me. The unwillingness to go see a counselor at community college. They don't know me more than me. I'll do it myself. Like, how stupid is that? But that's what I did.
Yes. Well, I think that, I'm Gen X too. So I completely relate to that, and being independent. I do, although it's not a memoir, the first chapter, I do kind of tell a little bit about my personal story, so that, people can see I'm relatable and I get, the challenges of all this. But I think that we at least back then, we're left to, well, let me start over and say, I think that need for independence has something to do with building our own self confidence and worth, and also our own safety net under us. Like if we can do it ourselves, then we know we'll be okay because we won't have to depend on anybody else. And I think that really is something that when you get to a place where you aren't questioning that in yourself anymore, that you've got your own back, and that you are capable, and you've proven that to a certain degree, you can start to let go of it a little bit, and maybe you're at this place where you can open yourself up to, oh, I don't necessarily need to call them authorities, but they're maybe experts in their own,
Right.
areas. And so you have really gone through a big metamorphosis in that you were really, resistant to authority and other people's opinions. And now you're so open to them that you built a business around, asking questions and learning, from them. And so I think that just goes to show that you've built self-confidence,
Mhm.
and some of your own worth. That you're also, human, and have opportunities to grow and learn from other people as well in order to do that. And I
Yeah.
think it does take self-confidence to admit that we need each other.
Well, and I think our correction in our generation, for those of us that are like that, is, hey, go get a mentor. Don't be such a dipshit. Like, don't figure this out on your own,
Well,
because
we're
you're going to
really
make all
lucky to
these.
have so many resources these days, because
Right,
you
right.
could. I mean, one resource that I've been using while writing this book, and through some other business practices, is the SCORE group. I don't know if you know the
Mm,
SCORE
mm-mm.
organization, but they're
No.
retirees mostly. I mean, there's some that are still working, but that have had a certain amount of work experience, and now they're donating their time to help other people. And SCORE is a very amazing program, because you just go up there and you tell them the type of thing that you're looking to do. It can literally be business planning, it could be financial planning, it could be, I did one about self-publishing books, and I got to be matched with somebody who was a book publisher. I did one where I wanted to talk about consumer trends, for my Glow Living business, and trying to figure out where I could, bring that to market. And back in the day when I was entering the music industry, I got matched up with Chris Stone, who was one of the original founders of the Record Plant. I didn't know the significance of at the time, but he's legendary in the industry, and he left me with one of the business principles that I use for consulting to this day. And it's about the balance of how many retainer-based clients versus project-based clients that a consultant should have in order to stay open to,
Yeah.
opportunity, and be able to you know, solicit referrals, and benefit from those. And so, to this day, I'm using guiding principles that I learned from him many, many years ago. And he's no longer with us. So I love to pay that forward. But
Yeah.
there's organizations, there's resources out there, and I guess leaving people with something as inexpensive as my book, but it can be free resources like through SCORE, or it can be through discounted online mental health services. I think I did BetterHelp once
Mm.
to work on an issue. You don't have to boil the ocean with therapy. Sometimes people are like, I don't want to go and have to deal with everything. Sometimes it's about an issue. Like, for example, in my book, I will write about all kinds of stuff about life. And then there's a point at which I might say, if this is, you, then consider professional, talking to a professional, because I'm a professional coach. And what that means is that I know when to refer somebody
Mm.
to a professional therapist. Therapy and coaching are different. So I have kind of a new campaign that I'm promoting, which is certification matters. It matters to be a certified life coach, because we are trained on when people need to be referred to professional therapy, and what we
Mm.
can do to support people. And a lot of times people have teams, they bring in teams to support themselves. They might have therapy over deeper issues that are, possibly based in childhood wounding and core beliefs and principles and all that. And then they have
Yeah.
their coach to help them bring this into their life and make a day-to-day transformation and changes and how they're dealing with, conflicts and things like that. So sometimes people will have both.
Yeah. We're talking with Chandra Lynn, and her book right here is Root to Rise. There's the link for it, and it's in pre-sale now. It'll be out around about a week. And I highly recommend you get it because, like I said, it jumps off right away and it starts resonating with me. And I wrote down about 15 things and I stopped. We're only going to get to about 3 of them. But there was so much of it just starting in the very, very beginning. When I first came back from Afghanistan, I knew I needed to work on me. I lived this different life. And this will sound silly, but I realized that I was becoming the desperado that the Eagles sing about. Like there was nothing too cold. There was nothing big in life anymore. Like I had been worn smooth through conflict, and I needed to fix that. And so I went and I started doing yoga, which is the antithesis of this tough combat guy. And I'm in Sacramento, and there's all these middle-aged ladies around me. And like a month before, I'd been around a bunch of infantry guys. Like it's such a different world. And I even like hired like some private lessons so I could try to figure this out because my body doesn't work normally anymore, and so I've got to find alternate poses for the alternate poses. And you talked about tree, like mountains, my good stance. I just stand still and I can do that forever. But you
That's
talked
like
about
a really hard pose, the
yeah,
mountain pose, like where you're just
yeah,
basically standing there can be very difficult for
I
people.
can, I can do that one all day. And
Good.
but I can't do bird. I cannot do downward dog at all. I just can't. Everybody tells me that I can, but I'm like, I can't. It's not a thing I can do. So I have to find some other way to get the benefit of that. Anyhow, I hired this person and she was explaining to me like a couple of things. She's like, I want you to, so we were at this park and there's a rose garden. She's like, take a soft focus on those roses. And I'm like, I got it. I'm focused 100%. She's like, that's laser focus. Try soft focus. And I'm like, there is no soft. It's only laser, and so I'm like, I can see the petal. I can see I was just, she's like, that is laser. Stop being a laser. And I didn't know how, I didn't know how. And then she also taught me this thing where she's like, and I think this will resonate with you because your book reminded me of it, where I'm pushing all the time. She's like, if you stand next to a horse and you push on it, it's not going to move. It's going to push back. And I'm like, oh man, that's so smart. If I put my hands on the horse, I'll not be able to guide the horse and get it to move. But if I'm shoving, it's just going to shove back. And so quit just shoving on everything, Pete, you big dummy. And she didn't say that. I said that to me. But it was all these things that forced me to get out of my desperado mode and back out and go, all right, how do I reapproach these things? How do I soften up? How do I appreciate ice cream? When I've been gone so long that these things, I've been denied the nice things for so long that nothing was nice anymore.
Wow. Yeah, you definitely went through a lot, and I think people need to understand that when you're talking with somebody who's gone through extreme conditions, there's a lot to learn from them because they are experiencing life at the extreme. So most of
Mm-hmm.
us can't, are not experiencing it to that extent, and we're still having a hard time. So imagine the tools that you have been able to develop for yourself, how impactful they can be to somebody who
Mm-hmm.
has not even had to deal with it to that extreme. What's really interesting to me, and as a coach, I've been trained to listen for, are things like metaphors. The tree pose or the mountain pose, they're all metaphors for life, and
Mm-hmm.
I use metaphors a lot throughout the book because I think they can resonate with people. And they're mostly nature-based metaphors, but root to rise in itself is, it's based on the tree pose in yoga. And it's about, you may have heard yoga teachers even talking about it because they want you to visualize roots coming down from if your feet if you're standing, or your bottom if you're sitting, wherever your body is contacting the ground, in order to get that rooted feeling. But that's only the first part. The second part, that's rooting, right? The second part is having to stabilize and to balance your core. And from there, then you can extend up and have that organic extension for the rise. And that's what you're experiencing in your body physically. But this is a perfect metaphor for life. We have to root down and balance these different areas of our life. And we have to create this balance in our core and have emotional, stability in order to rise up and weather storms. So for this tree, and we're getting, these I call them winds of change, or
Mm-hmm.
things that are happening to us, whether it's grief and loss, like we talked about, and loss it can be more than people. It can be jobs. It can be having to move. It can, there's your kid growing up in your empty nest. I mean, there's all these different types of losses. And I do talk about them in the book a bit. And having that core of emotional stability in order to weather those storms is what that process is about. And then the final process is actually the rise. It's the part that we expect ourselves to do when we're kids, and we're like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And you envision this big life, and you haven't rooted, and you haven't stabilized, and you haven't built the emotional mastery, you haven't done all these things, but you expect your life to be, to achieve all these things. So what I'm suggesting with Root to Rise is we go back in the roots, we rebalance, these different life areas, figure out where we've gotten stuck, get unstuck from those things, figure out how to, have more emotional stability, and then rise in a way that's aligned to our adult thinking. What we wanted to be when we grew up might need to be updated because we want to be authentic to ourselves now. We don't want to just, want to be what we thought we should be back in the day. We want to be who we, what the person that resonates with us today. And most of the time when you talk to people our age, what we want to be or what we want to do often is connected to contributing something on a deeper level, like something more meaningful, something, because we've often done those jobs that maybe don't have as much, significance to helping other people and stuff. And we go, okay, well, we did that and we're left a little flat, now we want to do something really significant. And so realigning to that's called, in my book, Connecting to Authenticity. Then we have to line other people, the fact that we're about to make significant changes in our careers and our life and our approach to things, and that may or may not work for everybody. But then chunking it up and creating actionable steps on how to achieve it, and then benefiting from those achievements in a way that, is at a deeper level, because we know those achievements aren't just for our own needs. It's also to serve others.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a lot of these kind of conversations with people because apparently I'm someone people could talk to, and I guess that probably stems back to my spy time and everything else and what I've developed professionally. And so when I'm talking about this, everybody out there, I'm not talking about you, but there is someone that I talk to, and this person is lost right now. They're not sure what to do next. They have all the opportunity in the world, but it's just too big. And then they have their own internal things. They're small, they're me things that they have to work on. And all they ever get is suggestions for everybody on what they should do. And I know that would aggravate me about the show. Here's what you need to do, Pete. I'm like, oh, you're going to give me a bunch of extra work? My plate is already full, right? So I try not to do that when I'm at my best. When I'm not at my best, I'm like everybody else. I want to help this person. And so I'm going to tell them what they need to do. But I haven't got the first clue what this person needs to do, because the way that they're stuck is it's all them kind of work. And if they can tell me something that I can do for them in a second, right? But I've learned that, and I'm not great at it with this person because it is frustrating, but I want this person to do well, but the direction they're pointed in, which is no direction really, they're going to have to struggle for a while. And in classic middle-aged form, this person will tell me, I'm fine. Yeah. You're anything but fine, but okay, we'll play the you're fine game. And it's tough to know what to do to help that person or anybody in that circumstance. And again, if you think I'm talking about you, I'm not. You're wonderful. Give me a call. Okay, sorry.
Right? Actually, I would love to respond to that, because I approach things as an invitation and not an obligation. And usually and this is really hard to do when I want to bestow my wisdom on people, is to invite them and also ask, if they're open to it. Because honestly, I'm just, expending my energy unnecessarily if they're not open. So the question is, how interested or open are you to hearing, my thoughts on this? Or have you been looking for any new ways of looking at this? Are you open to some suggestions? And we rarely, I don't know that we're really trained to, or we think about asking or inviting people to information. Usually people are just get into tell mode and they just tell people everything. But what you're really seeking is that willingness to open up and listen and take in your advice or your ideas. And inviting people to it can be a softer approach to going, you know, this is really up to you as to whether it resonates with you or whether you want to put it into action. But here, and also I'll say, this is how it's worked for me. Like I'll lead with
Mm,
myself as an example and say, it may not work for you, but it works for me. You know, how
right.
interested are
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
in trying it, you know? And I'm really fascinated if it works for you, because we don't know 100% that something is going to absolutely work for someone. And not to should on yourself or should on other people, right? So it's like we can only suggest, invite, welcome, ask, you know, offer, and then they really have to look at their own whys, you know,
Yeah.
and willingness. That's why I started this whole thing with, what do you want? Why do you want it? And what are you willing to do about it? Because those are great questions for them to ask, and you could, or ask themselves, and
Yeah.
you can, you know, ask them subtly too, because people who are closed often will open with questions. They're not going to open with being told something. They're going to be,
Mm,
but if you say, well, what is it that you're looking for? Oh, da, da, da. Oh, how willing are you to do those things that you just said you needed to do to get that? You know, um,
yeah.
it's simple, innocent question. Behind it, you know that these are key questions that can really unlock something, because they might be facing their own unwillingness at that point
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
the necessary steps to have transformation.
Boy. Yeah. That's saying a lot right there. Our willingness to do what it takes. You know, when I talk about teaching people about podcasting, I'm not going to be the problem. I know how to podcast, and I don't say that arrogantly. I've done the work. I've got the license. And so if you come to me, I can say, I'm not going to be the problem. It's going to be you. Here's probably where your problems are going to be. Do you still want to do this? And I've talked a lot of people out of doing podcasts
I'm not
because,
gonna be the problem, you are.
yeah, well, because that's the thing, right? Like you have this dream of being a podcaster. All right, you've talked to the perfect person, but
Yeah.
are you up to the challenge? Because this is going to be work. It's going to cost you time and money. And they don't want to hear that, right? And so they are the problem in this case. Or like the CEO that's like, I'll have plenty of time to give my thoughts. No, you won't, because you're going to be overwhelmed by your schedule. You're going to waste my time. I'm going to bill you for it, and it's not going to work. Like, are you willing to do this? Are you willing? Are you willing to do these things to get there? Because if you're willing to, then you're going to have a show, you know? And
I
that's how,
love this willingness conversation, because it is a start to my book as well, which is that, you know, there's different ways people can read my book. One is just, you know, superficially reading and getting what they can from,
yeah,
you know, this kind of passive exercise. The other is to roll up their sleeves, grab the workbook, you know, do all the exercises,
yeah,
and I have to ask them early on in the book, how willing are you to do this and show up for yourself in that way? I think it's a personal responsibility for us
mm,
to do this type of work for ourselves, for, you know, and because it affects how we show up for other people. But
yeah,
not everybody's willing to do that or take personal responsibility for their own emotions or how they land on people or the energy arrows they send out or any of these things we've been talking about. They just want to
mm,
be how they are and have everybody accept it, uh, or move aside, you know?
yeah,
And I think that when we all take personal responsibility for our own happiness by doing the work, then imagine what a world that would be, right? If
mm,
everybody did that, it would be very
yeah,
different. And so that's why I love the concept of it. But it does start with that willingness. Are you willing to read the whole book? Because there's some parts that are instructional and you just have to get that foundational information before you can apply it.
right.
You know, are you willing to answer hard questions about things like why you want something you want, or how you're dealing with grief, or how you're showing up for others, or what energy arrows you're putting out? I'm just using these because we've talked
Yeah,
about them. But if there's a part of you that's not willing, then you're going to just be the skimmer, or you're going to read the first two chapters and you're going to be done. But what I can say is that those people who really go through the process, which I have, you know, led in workshops and stuff, have tried to credit me for huge life transformations. And I've showed them that through their willingness and through their work, that they actually were the ones responsible for that change.
sure.
And it's extremely
Yeah.
empowering.
Uh, I want to ask you about. So I have a loose rule. This does not apply to you, but if someone presents their pitch to me and they say, I'm a life coach, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Because, and I'm a big believer in, you don't need a license to do these things. Like, if you can go learn more about the specific study thing than a doctor, it's possible today. You have to do the work, but I just, with coaching, it's hard to, I don't give a lot of credit there. It's like hi, I'm a 23-year-old fitness model. Like, no, you're 23. That's what you are. Like, I know you're into fitness, but like, how are you going to help me? I'm 55. My body is beat up, and I appreciate you're young and pretty. I was young and pretty once too. So these are things where I struggle with. Yeah, what is a coach? Like, how do you know if you're gonna? Because look, I want people to get paid, and if you're gonna help me, like the way the coaches all say they're gonna help me, great. But I also know if I go to a golf expo, I'll walk through there and everybody's going to give me a stroke. I'm going to get so many strokes. I'm going to shoot an 8 when I go out and golf because there's so many strokes in that building, And so, but that's not real. So how do you determine, like, what is a good coach, and how do you know if it's good for you, more importantly?
Yeah, I completely relate to what you're saying, because when I first got certified as a coach, there weren't as many coaches out there. And now you could take one, Udemy course for watching a video for 2 hours and be certified. I don't know what that means, but my point is that there's two ways that I'll answer that question. One is that it has to just resonate with you, and not everybody will. But the ones that do, it could be hard-won wisdom, or it could be certification, or it can be something else. But I think that the reason why I'm on the platform of certification matters is because there's research involved, there's tested tools involved, there's things like intakes, evaluations, there's things like knowing like I talked about earlier, knowing when to refer to a professional therapist, because the most dangerous thing is when a life coach tries to manage somebody who really needs a professional help in certain areas. Like, for example, you might come across somebody who's suicidal, like we talked about. And if you and there's a certain amount that, that you can help them, but if you don't call that, it's your responsibility as a certified coach to guide them towards a professional. And I think that what's tough is that the coaches who are a little bit more self-proclaimed may not know all, like, the ethical standards around this kind of thing. And it's really done to support the individual. And so I would say that, so yes, I understand that there's been a windfall of coaches, and then it's hard sometimes to know whether you're working with somebody who has enough to really support you. Age, it's interesting because my grandparents were both therapists, and they wanted me to take over their practice and everything like that. But at a young age, I was super ambitious, got an MBA at 24. I was ready to roll. I knew that I loved personal growth and development at that time, but I felt like I was too young to be anybody's therapist. And so I went into marketing because it's very relationship oriented. It's very creative. I was able to get out in the world, and I went into entertainment. So of course, there was a lot of that going on. But ultimately I circled back to helping people and doing that anyway as an older person. I'm going to be 55 actually in 2 weeks. No, 3 weeks. Thank
Welcome to the party.
July 14th for anyone who wants to send flowers. Just kidding. But the point is that I think it dovetails into what I was saying before about wanting to, when you're connecting to your authenticity, what it is you want to be known for, what do you want to contribute, it starts to get updated as an adult. And so here I am sitting in this place after a long career as a marketing consultant where I've done all kinds of things, to wanting to really focus on how I can use that for good and use that to make a big difference in people's lives. And I think, and if I can be on a team a team of professionals to support somebody that's really struggling or suicidal or whatever, I'm not afraid of it, and so be it. And that's, what I'm here to do. But hopefully I'll just be able to, it kind of inspire people to do their own personal growth and development and take control of their own self-help and provide the tools that can be empowering to just give them hope, with being able to ultimately love life despite its challenges.
I love it. You nailed the landing on that. That was right at 59 minutes and a couple of seconds. So I'll
Mhm.
give you a chance to wrap us up with any final words. But everybody, listen, I love Chandra's work. Here is the link again to Root to Rise. That's where you get it. You know what I always say? Buy two and buddy read it. This would be a great buddy read up for sure. And what a great way to support everything that Chandra's doing and has done. I can tell you guys, just knowing outside of the podcast, she's a wonderful person and a
Mhm.
wonderful person to go sit with and talk with. She's always full of advice and counsel, and just it's great. So it's great being your friend. And you guys will all like her book, so definitely dig into that. Please close us out with whatever you want to close us with.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I really hope that what we've talked about resonates with people out there. And I just wanna say that so my actual official website is glowliving.com, and I do have information on the book there. I also have a free quiz that people can take to learn about the needs that are driving their key life decisions. This is really where I feel like people need to start, is to understand their human needs psychology and how they have been making decisions to meet those needs, and how sometimes those decisions can, you know, kind of take you off course with where you would like to ultimately go. And so I would say get on there and take that free super fast quiz on glowliving.com, and read about the book. And then other people have asked me to host some circles around, group coaching kind of thing around the book. And so look forward to that by getting on my newsletter, and I'll be making those announcements. And I'm not sure, Pete, if you're on Substack, but I'm testing this right now to
Mhm.
kind of move my newsletter to Substack so that I could have more editorial, more coaching content there, so people can find me on Substack as well. But I definitely look forward to hearing from people and what's resonated and what hasn't. I'll be open to hearing your comments at chandra@glowliving.com.
There we go. All right. I'm going to turn this off. I'll say goodbye to you in a second. Everybody else, have a great weekend. Great shows coming up next week.